You know what? Toxic parenting can have a long-lasting impact on your mental and emotional health, shaping how you see yourself and others, even into adulthood. Toxic parenting doesn't just hurt you in the moment, but it leaves behind emotional scars that shape how you see yourself and the world. Growing up in a toxic environment can make you doubt your worth, struggle with trusting others, or feel anxious and fearful. The effects are like ripples, spreading through your life and influencing everything from your confidence to your relationships. It can be subtle, but the damage is real. When parents constantly criticize, neglect, or manipulate their children, they plant seeds of self-doubt and insecurity that can take years to heal. Understanding these signs is the first step to healing. If you don't realize how your upbringing shaped you, those old wounds will keep hurting you. Recognizing the signs of toxic parenting helps you take back control, break free from harmful patterns, and start living a life that's truly yours. So in this video, we're going to explore the key signs that show you've been raised by toxic parents, how these signs still affect you today, and what you can do to heal and grow. Sign number 1. You are overly critical of yourself and others. If you are overly critical of yourself and others, it's a sign that you've been raised up by toxic parents. Do you find yourself constantly judging your actions, thoughts, and appearance? Or maybe you're quick to notice and point out the flaws in other people? This tendency to be overly critical often stems from an environment where you were regularly criticized, judged, or made to feel inadequate. When your parents are toxic, they might use criticism as a way to control or manipulate you, making you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. As a child, you might have been told that you were too loud, too quiet, not smart enough, or not talented enough. You may have been compared to other siblings, cousins, or even strangers, leaving you with the sense that you always fell short. These experiences can lead you to internalize these criticisms and carry them into adulthood, constantly critiquing yourself and others. This behavior can become a defense mechanism, a way to protect yourself from further criticism by being the first to point out flaws before anyone else does. Being overly critical of yourself can have a profound impact on your mental and emotional well-being. When you constantly judge yourself harshly, it can lead to feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, and even depression. You might struggle with perfectionism, feeling like you need to be perfect in everything you do to avoid criticism or judgment. This can create immense pressure, leading to burnout, stress, and a constant sense of dissatisfaction. You might also be afraid to try new things or take risks because you fear failure and the subsequent self-criticism that would follow. Let's consider a real-life example to illustrate this further. Imagine you've just started a new hobby, like painting. Instead of enjoying the process and learning from your mistakes, you find yourself constantly criticizing your work, thinking, "This is terrible," or "I'm not talented enough to do this." You might even compare your paintings to those of others and feel like you're not measuring up. This self-criticism can take the joy out of your hobby and make you want to quit altogether because you feel you're not good enough. Now, let's flip the scenario. Imagine your friend invites you over to show you their new painting, and you immediately notice all the flaws, the uneven brushstrokes, the off-center composition. Without thinking, you blurt out, "It's nice, but it's a bit messy, don't you think?" Your friend's face falls, and you realize you've hurt their feelings. In both scenarios, the critical voice is there, whether it's directed at yourself or someone else. This constant judgment can damage your self-esteem and strain your relationships, making it harder for you to connect with others and find joy in everyday activities. Sign number 2. You try to become a perfectionist. Another sign that indicates you might have been raised by toxic parents is the tendency to strive for perfection in everything you do. If you constantly feel the need to be perfect and are never satisfied with anything less, this could be a result of your upbringing. Perfectionism often stems from an environment where love and approval were conditional, based on how well you performed. In such settings, you may have learned that your worth was tied to your achievements, whether it was getting straight A's in school, excelling in sports, or behaving perfectly. You may have felt that if you weren't perfect, you weren't worthy of love or respect. Growing up, were you always trying to prove yourself? Did you feel like you had to be the best at everything to earn your parents' approval? This constant pressure to be flawless can turn into perfectionism, a relentless pursuit of standards that are often unrealistic and impossible to meet. While it might seem like striving for perfection is a positive trait, it can actually be quite damaging. It can lead to anxiety, stress, and a constant feeling of not being good enough, no matter how hard you try. Being a perfectionist can significantly impact your mental and emotional well-being. You may set extremely high standards for yourself that are difficult or impossible to achieve. When you inevitably fall short, you might experience intense feelings of failure, shame, or self-criticism. You might tell yourself, "I'm not good enough," or "I should have done better." This can lead to a cycle of self-blame and negativity, where nothing you do ever feels satisfactory, and you are constantly striving for something just out of reach. Perfectionism can also cause significant stress and anxiety. The fear of making mistakes or not meeting your own high standards can make you feel overwhelmed and paralyzed. You may find yourself procrastinating on tasks because you're afraid of not doing them perfectly, or you might spend an excessive amount of time on even simple tasks trying to make them flawless. This can lead to burnout as you exhaust yourself trying to achieve perfection in every aspect of your life. Additionally, perfectionism can prevent you from taking risks or trying new things because you fear failing or not being perfect at them right away. Imagine you're working on a project at work. Instead of completing the task to the best of your ability and moving on, you find yourself obsessing over every little detail. You spend hours trying to make it perfect, revising and editing over and over again. Even when you finally submit it, you can't help but think about all the ways it could have been better, and you worry about what others will think. This kind of perfectionism can lead to unnecessary stress and prevent you from moving forward with other important tasks. Perfectionism also affects your relationships. You might hold others to the same high standards you set for yourself, leading to frustration and disappointment when they don't measure up. You may become overly critical of loved ones, expecting them to be perfect as well, which can create tension and conflict. On the other hand, you might fear that others will judge you as harshly as you judge yourself, leading you to avoid intimacy or vulnerability in relationships. This can result in feeling isolated or disconnected from those around you, as you're always trying to present a perfect facade rather than showing your true self. But remember, life is not about being flawless. It's about learning, growing, and accepting your humanity. True fulfillment comes from embracing your imperfections and understanding that you are enough just as you are. Perfection is an illusion, and chasing it will only lead to exhaustion. Instead, seek balance, kindness, and acceptance of your journey, no matter how imperfect it may seem. In Christianity, too, the Bible teaches that humans are imperfect, and that it's through grace and humility, not perfection, that we find peace. Sign number 3. You struggle to express your emotions, feelings, or needs. Another powerful sign that you may have been raised by toxic parents is if you struggle to express your emotions, feelings, or needs. Growing up in a toxic environment often means that emotional expression is not only discouraged, but sometimes outright punished or dismissed. When your parents or guardians don't acknowledge or validate your feelings, you learn to suppress them. You might have been told things like, "Stop crying," "You're too sensitive," or "Get over it." These phrases, often repeated, teach you that your emotions are not important, or worse, that they are a burden to others. You may have learned to bottle up your feelings, to keep them hidden deep inside, because expressing them could lead to criticism, ridicule, or punishment. Over time, this creates a habit of emotional suppression. You find it difficult to talk about your feelings, and even when you want to, you might not know how. This emotional suppression can extend to all areas of life, affecting your relationships, work, and even your sense of self. You may become disconnected from your own emotions, finding it hard to even identify what you're feeling, let alone communicate it to others. When you struggle to express your emotions, you might find yourself feeling misunderstood or disconnected from others. This lack of emotional expression can lead to feelings of loneliness or isolation because you are not fully engaging with those around you. It can also make it challenging to build deep, meaningful relationships. After all, a relationship is built on understanding and sharing, and if you can't express your feelings, you can't share your true self with others. You may find yourself holding back, afraid that showing your true emotions will lead to rejection or judgment, just as it might have when you were a child. Emotional suppression doesn't just affect your relationships with others. It also impacts your relationship with yourself. You may start to feel out of touch with your own emotions, not knowing how to feel happy, sad, or even neutral. This disconnection from your own feelings can make it difficult to make decisions, as emotions play a critical role in understanding what is right for us and what is not. You may feel numb, as if you are simply going through the motions of life without really experiencing it. This numbness can lead to a lack of fulfillment and a sense of emptiness or depression. Additionally, constantly suppressing emotions can lead to physical health problems. The mind and body are closely connected, and when you bottle up your feelings, your body may react in various ways. You might experience stress, anxiety, headaches, or even chronic illnesses. Holding on to negative emotions can take a toll on your physical well-being, leading to tension in your muscles, digestive issues, and other stress-related ailments. You might also find yourself turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms, such as overeating, drinking, or other addictions, as a way to numb or avoid your emotions. In Buddhism, emotions are a natural part of the human experience, and there is great wisdom in acknowledging and understanding them. Buddhism teaches that all emotions, whether positive or negative, arise from our interactions with the world and our perceptions of it. Instead of suppressing these emotions, Buddhism encourages us to observe them without judgment and to understand their impermanent nature. By recognizing that emotions are fleeting and changeable, we can learn to experience them fully without becoming attached to them. Imagine a person who was constantly told as a child that their emotions were too much or not valid. As an adult, they might struggle in their relationships, finding it hard to open up to their partner or friends. They might feel a constant inner turmoil, wanting to express their feelings, but not knowing how. This could lead to misunderstandings and conflicts, as others may perceive them as cold or distant. Their inability to express emotions might also cause them to overreact in situations where they feel overwhelmed, as all those suppressed emotions finally come to the surface in a burst. So how can you start to heal from this emotional suppression and learn to express your emotions more freely? The first step is to acknowledge that your feelings are valid and important. Understand that it is okay to have emotions, and it is okay to express them. Start by identifying what you are feeling. This might seem simple, but for those who are used to suppressing emotions, it can be a significant challenge. Take time each day to check in with yourself and ask, "What am I feeling right now?" Name the emotion without judgment, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, or something else. Next, practice expressing your emotions in a safe environment. This could be through journaling, where you write down your feelings and thoughts, or by talking to a trusted friend or therapist. The key is to start small and gradually build your confidence in expressing yourself. Remember that it's okay to make mistakes or to feel awkward at first. This is a learning process. Over time, as you become more comfortable with your emotions, you will find it easier to express them in a way that feels authentic and true to yourself. Meditation can also be a powerful tool for reconnecting with your emotions. Through mindfulness meditation, you can learn to observe your emotions without becoming overwhelmed by them. This practice can help you become more aware of your emotional triggers and patterns, allowing you to respond to your feelings with greater clarity and calmness. By cultivating a mindful awareness of your emotions, you can learn to express them more freely and with less fear of judgment or rejection. Finally, seek out supportive relationships where you feel safe to express your emotions. Surround yourself with people who listen without judgment and who respect and value your feelings. Building a network of supportive friends and loved ones can provide a safe space for you to practice emotional expression and to learn that it is okay to be vulnerable. Over time, as you continue to practice expressing your emotions, you will find greater ease and confidence in sharing your true self with others, leading to deeper, more meaningful connections and a greater sense of fulfillment and well-being. Sign number 4. You are attracted to toxic relationships or patterns. Let's talk about a sign that might be hard to recognize but is incredibly important. You find yourself drawn to toxic relationships or unhealthy patterns. This doesn't mean you want to be unhappy or hurt. It's usually the opposite. Deep down, you're looking for love, validation, and connection, just like anyone else. But if you were raised by toxic parents, your idea of what's normal in a relationship might be different. You might end up choosing friends or partners who repeat the same harmful behaviors you experienced growing up. When you are raised in a toxic environment, you learn to see certain behaviors, like manipulation, control, or emotional unavailability, as normal. These become your comfort zones, even if they are unhealthy. You might not consciously realize it, but you could be repeating patterns that feel familiar to you, even if they are harmful. For example, if you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable or controlling, you might find yourself in a relationship with someone who behaves similarly. This happens because the brain often seeks what it knows, even if what it knows is not good for it. This cycle can be incredibly difficult to break because it's rooted in the patterns you learned as a child. If you grew up feeling that love comes with conditions or that affection is something you have to earn, you might end up in relationships where you feel like you have to prove your worth constantly. You may find yourself attracted to people who are hard to please or who make you feel like you're never enough. This is because, deep down, you're trying to resolve the unresolved issues from your childhood. You might think, if I can just get this person to love me, then maybe I'll be worthy of love. But this is a dangerous cycle. It keeps you stuck in a loop of seeking validation from people who can't or won't give it to you in a healthy way. You might keep choosing partners or friends who are emotionally distant, critical, or even abusive, all because this feels familiar to you. You might feel a strange comfort in the chaos, the ups and downs, because it reminds you of what you went through growing up. And because of this, you might not even realize that there's a healthier way to be loved and to love others. Breaking free from this cycle requires understanding and awareness. It's about recognizing these patterns for what they are, unhealthy and rooted in your past. It's also about acknowledging that you deserve better. You deserve relationships that are nurturing, supportive, and kind. But first, you have to see the pattern and understand why you're drawn to it. Buddhism teaches us a lot about attachment and how it affects our relationships. According to Buddhist teachings, much of our suffering comes from clinging to things, people, or ideas that we think will make us happy or complete us. When it comes to relationships, this can mean clinging to someone who is not good for us because we believe that without them, we are incomplete or unworthy. This type of attachment is harmful because it is based on fear and insecurity rather than genuine love and connection. Buddhism encourages us to look inward and understand the roots of our attachments. Why do we hold on to relationships that hurt us? Why do we seek out partners who don't treat us well? Often, it's because we are trying to fill a void or heal a wound from our past. But true healing doesn't come from outside ourselves. It comes from within. Buddhism teaches that we must learn to love and accept ourselves first, to find peace and contentment within ourselves before we can have healthy relationships with others. Focus on self-love and self-compassion. Remind yourself that you are worthy of healthy, supportive relationships. Practice setting boundaries and saying no to people who don't respect your needs or treat you with kindness. This might be difficult at first, especially if you're used to putting others' needs before your own. But remember, setting boundaries is an act of self-care and self-respect. It's about protecting your peace and your well-being. Sign number 5. You are anxious or fearful of making mistakes. Let's dive into another sign that you might have been raised by toxic parents. You are constantly anxious or fearful of making mistakes. This isn't just about being careful or wanting to do a good job. It's a deeper, more intense fear that makes you feel nervous, even paralyzed, when you think about doing something wrong. You might find yourself worrying for hours, days, or even weeks about mistakes you've made or could make in the future. This kind of anxiety can be crippling. It can stop you from trying new things, speaking up, or taking risks, because you're always afraid of what might go wrong. Why does this happen? If you were raised in a toxic environment, you may have been criticized harshly for even the smallest errors. Maybe your parents punished you for things that weren't your fault, or they made you feel like you were never good enough. Over time, you learned that making a mistake could lead to rejection, anger, or punishment. This created a deep fear of getting things wrong. And now, as an adult, that fear shows up as anxiety or nervousness every time you face a situation where you could make a mistake. Let's talk about how this fear of mistakes really takes root. Imagine being a child and constantly hearing things like, "Why can't you do anything right?" or "You're such a disappointment." These words cut deep, especially when they come from the people you depend on for love and support. Instead of learning that mistakes are a natural part of learning and growing, you learned that making mistakes means something is wrong with you. You might have been blamed for things beyond your control, or been made to feel that any error was a personal failing, not just a simple mistake. When children are repeatedly criticized or shamed for their mistakes, they start to internalize these harsh judgments. They begin to believe, "I must be perfect," or "I will be unloved and unwanted." As a result, you might develop a perfectionist attitude, not because you love perfection, but because you're terrified of what might happen if you mess up. This mindset can follow you into adulthood, where every decision feels like walking on eggshells. You might second-guess yourself constantly, overthink even the simplest choices, and avoid situations where you might not excel. This constant fear of making mistakes can lead to a lack of confidence and a feeling of being stuck. You might avoid new opportunities, shy away from challenges, or stick to what's safe and familiar. You might think, "If I don't try, I can't fail." But this mindset keeps you from growing and reaching your full potential. You end up living a life that feels small and constrained, all because you're afraid to make a mistake and face the possible consequences. In Buddhism, there is a lot of wisdom about how we handle mistakes and imperfections. Buddhism teaches us that making mistakes is a natural part of being human. In fact, mistakes are seen as important opportunities for learning and growth. The key is not to be perfect, but to learn from each experience. This is a very different perspective from what many people grow up with, especially if they had toxic parents. Buddhism encourages us to let go of the fear of making mistakes and instead focus on what we can learn from each experience. There's a famous Buddhist teaching that says, "The arrow of regret is more painful than the arrow of error." This means that when we make a mistake, the mistake itself is not as painful as the regret and self-criticism we pile on ourselves afterward. In other words, our harsh judgments about our mistakes often cause more suffering than the mistakes themselves. Buddhism encourages us to practice self-compassion and to view each mistake as a valuable teacher, rather than as a reason to criticize ourselves. In Buddhism, there is also the concept of beginner's mind. This means approaching life with the openness and curiosity of a beginner, rather than the fear and rigidity of someone who feels they must always get everything right. A beginner is willing to make mistakes and sees them as part of the journey. By adopting this mindset, we can start to see our mistakes not as failures, but as opportunities to learn, grow, and become more understanding and compassionate towards ourselves and others. Sign number 6. You are people-pleasing and seek validation from others. Let's talk about another sign that you might have been raised by toxic parents. You are constantly people-pleasing or seeking validation from others. This behavior is more than just being nice or wanting to be liked. It's a deep-rooted need to please everyone around you, often at the expense of your own needs and feelings. You might find yourself always agreeing with others, saying yes when you want to say no, or going out of your way to avoid conflict. You might feel uneasy if someone is upset with you, and you might go to great lengths to make sure everyone is happy, even if it means sacrificing your own happiness. This need to please others often stems from a desire for approval or fear of rejection. If you grew up in a toxic environment where love and acceptance were conditional, you might have learned that the only way to feel safe or valued was to make sure everyone around you was happy. You might have felt like you had to earn love by being good, helpful, or agreeable. Now, as an adult, you might find yourself still chasing that approval, constantly seeking validation from others to feel worthy or good enough. People-pleasing often begins in childhood, especially if you were raised by parents who were emotionally unpredictable or who only showed you love when you did something right in their eyes. Imagine growing up in a household where you never knew if your parents would praise you or criticize you. Maybe one day they were kind and loving, but the next day they were angry and distant. In such an environment, children learn to be very attuned to their parents' moods and needs. They become people pleasers to avoid conflict and gain a sense of safety and acceptance. Over time, this behavior becomes ingrained. You might start to believe that your worth depends on what you can do for others or how well you can meet their expectations. This mindset can carry over into adulthood, where you find yourself constantly seeking approval from friends, partners, bosses, or even strangers. You might worry excessively about what others think of you or feel crushed by any hint of disapproval or criticism. Your sense of self-worth becomes tied to the opinions and validation of those around you. When you're always trying to please others, you end up neglecting your own needs and feelings. You might find it hard to set boundaries or say no because you fear it will make others upset or cause them to reject you. This can lead to burnout, resentment, and a deep sense of unfulfillment as you spend so much energy trying to make others happy while neglecting your own happiness. Consider a person who grew up in a household where their achievements were the only way to gain their parents' approval. They might have always been the good child, the one who got good grades, helped around the house, and never caused any trouble. As an adult, this person might find themselves constantly seeking praise and validation at work, in relationships, or even in social settings. They might feel anxious when they don't receive positive feedback or when someone is displeased with them, even over small things. They might avoid expressing their true feelings or opinions for fear of upsetting others or causing conflict. Think about your own life. Do you find yourself frequently seeking validation from others? Do you feel uncomfortable or anxious when someone is unhappy with you? Or do you go out of your way to avoid conflict, even if it means not standing up for yourself? Do you feel like you're constantly trying to earn love or approval rather than feeling inherently worthy? If so, this might be a sign that you've been raised in a way that conditioned you to believe your value is tied to how much you can please others. So how can you start to overcome this habit of people-pleasing and seeking validation? The first step is to start recognizing your own needs and feelings. Take some time each day to check in with yourself and ask, what do I need right now? How do I feel about this situation? This helps you reconnect with your own inner voice and understand your own needs, separate from the needs of others. Practice setting small boundaries. This might mean saying no to a request that feels overwhelming or speaking up when you disagree with something. Start small and gradually work up to bigger boundaries. Remember, it's okay to prioritize your own well-being and say no when you need to. It doesn't make you selfish. It makes you self-aware and responsible for your own happiness. Another important step is to cultivate self-compassion. Remind yourself that you are worthy of love and respect just as you are, without having to earn it by pleasing others. Practice talking to yourself in a kind and supportive way, especially when you feel anxious or worried about making others happy. Say to yourself, "It's okay to prioritize my own needs," and "I am worthy of respect and kindness, even if I can't make everyone happy all the time." Lastly, consider practicing mindfulness or meditation to help you become more aware of your patterns and learn to let go of the need for external validation. Mindfulness helps you stay present and connected to your own experience, rather than getting caught up in worries about what others think. By focusing on your own inner peace and well-being, you can start to break free from the cycle of people-pleasing and live a life that feels more authentic and fulfilling. Sign number 7. You are haunted by memories or feelings from your childhood. Have you ever felt that your childhood is like a ghost that you just can't shake off? That no matter how much you try to move on, certain memories or feelings from your past keep creeping back into your life? If you find yourself haunted by memories or emotions from your childhood, this could be a sign that you were raised by toxic parents. It's like these memories are stuck on repeat, playing over and over in your mind, causing you pain or distress. You might feel trapped by these memories, unable to escape their grasp, even as an adult. These could be memories of specific events, like times when you felt abandoned, criticized, or unloved. Or they could be more general feelings, like a lingering sense of not being good enough, or always feeling on edge, waiting for the next outburst or criticism. These experiences don't just disappear as you grow older. Instead, they become ingrained in your mind, shaping how you see yourself, how you interact with others, and how you navigate the world around you. You may carry these childhood wounds with you, sometimes without even realizing it. When you grow up in a toxic environment, your mind often goes into survival mode. As a child, your brain is still developing, and it's very sensitive to the environment around you. If that environment is filled with negativity, unpredictability, or emotional turmoil, it leaves a mark. Imagine a child who's constantly told they're not good enough, who faces harsh criticism for small mistakes, or who never feels truly loved or accepted. These experiences are like deep cuts that leave scars, and as you grow, these scars don't just vanish. They remain as painful reminders of a time when you felt powerless or unworthy. Even years later, as an adult, certain things might trigger those old memories and feelings. Maybe someone criticizes you at work, and suddenly you're flooded with the same feelings of fear or shame you had as a child when your parents yelled at you. Or you find yourself in a situation where you feel abandoned, and it brings back all the memories of being left alone or neglected as a child. These triggers can be powerful, and they can make you feel like you're right back in those painful moments, reliving them as if they're happening all over again. Sometimes, you might not even be fully aware of these memories. You might just have a vague sense of unease or anxiety that you can't quite put your finger on, or you might find yourself reacting strongly to situations that seem minor and not understand why. This is because those old memories and feelings are still influencing you, even if you're not consciously aware of them. They're like ghosts from your past, haunting you and affecting your present life. In Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis on the power of the present moment. The teachings encourage us to be mindful and to live in the now, rather than being stuck in the past or worrying about the future. This is because holding on to past memories, especially painful ones, can cause a lot of suffering. When we cling to these memories, we give them power over us, allowing them to shape our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. But Buddhism teaches that we have the power to change this, to let go of the past, and to find peace in the present moment. So, how do you start to move past these haunting memories? The first step is awareness. Recognize when you're being triggered by a memory from your childhood. This might take some time, as these reactions can be automatic, but with practice, you can start to become more aware of what's happening in your mind and body. Notice when a situation brings up strong emotions, and take a moment to pause and reflect on where those feelings might be coming from. Once you're aware, practice grounding yourself in the present moment. This could be as simple as taking a few deep breaths, feeling the ground beneath your feet, or focusing on your surroundings. Remind yourself that you are safe now, and that you are no longer that child who felt scared or helpless. You have the power and the tools to protect and take care of yourself now, and you don't have to be afraid of those old memories anymore. Remember, understanding these signs is the first step toward healing. If you've recognized yourself in any of them, remember, you're not alone and you're not defined by your past. It's never too late to break free from the patterns toxic parenting has created. Embrace self-love, seek support, and start the journey to becoming the person you deserve to be. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join our community, where we grow together, heal together, and support each other on this journey. And remember, you deserve happiness and peace, no matter where you've come from.